Welcome to my in-depth review and discussion about one of my favorite horror movies of all time, The Blair Witch Project. And before I start the discussions, if you love horror movies, don't be afraid to subscribe to my channel and talk horror. With that being said, let's start the discussion. The Blair Witch Project was written and directed by Daniel Merritt and Eduardo Sanchez, and I want to personally thank those two for single-handedly changing the landscape of the horror genre. These two don't get enough credit for what they done and what they continue to do. And the three actors that starred in this film was Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard. And yes, these actors used their government names for this film, which is a great marketing tool, and the internet played a huge part in this promotion as well. It's a great idea, very creative, and it got the people buzzing and thinking, hey, what happened to these people? And the campaign for this movie was incredible, and the budget I think was around $60,000, which is unheard of for a box office movie, and that's below B movie territory. But I love the marketing strategy using fake news reporters, fake search parties for these three college students that you just thought was missing or dead. So basically, the Blair Witch is a fictional urban legend, which was set to believe a witch by the name of Ellie Ketward was casted out of this town formerly known as Blair because she was studying witchcraft or doing witchcraft. And that's not it. You also had this guy named Rustin Parr, and he walked into a store and said, "Finally finished." Later on, he was arrested for the killings of 7 children. And these children were killed ritualistic styles, and he said that the old woman made him do it. So was that Ellie Ketward? Who knows? That's a very great and creative storyline that Daniel Merrick and Eduardo Sanchez came up with. It's a great mythology for the movie, and it's very interesting, like I said. And this movie starts off with 3 college students prepping for a school project, and the project is about the legend of the Blair Witch. Heather and Josh were already good friends, and Josh brought his friend Mike along, and this was Mike's first time meeting Heather. And right off the bat, all 3 individuals got along well. They were all having fun in the motel room, telling jokes, drinking, but little did they know, things would take a deep turn, and a turn for the worse. The next day, they began to film their documentary, and we get to see some awesome scenery, some legendary camera shots of the graveyard, and then the legendary Burkittsville sign. This documentary involves some locals expressing their feelings and information about the history of the Blair Witch. We got some interesting people, especially that Mary Brown lady. She actually looked like the Blair Witch if you ask me. So fast forward, they finished the interviews and they began to hike through the woods. And eventually, Heather gets everyone lost. And this is where the controversy begins between the group. They would spend hours and hours traveling and getting even more lost. And we get to see a more aggressive side of Mike, which is understandable because ultimately, this is his first time meeting Heather and getting to know her, and basically he trusted her and she got him lost. And with tense energy in the air, things began to get worse, and every single night strange noises and even rocks and stick figures are surrounding their campsite, and things just kept getting worse and unpredictable. They try to brush things off and the stuff still keep going on, and even Mike makes things a little bit more worse than things already are by kicking the map into the river. Everyone was just at a breaking point, and I view this as the Blair Witch playing games with them. And if things weren't getting crazy enough, slime was all over Josh's clothes, and Josh is definitely freaking out. He's like, what the world is going on, and why is it only on my clothes and not everybody else's? And later on, the crew wakes up, but Josh is gone, out of sight, out of mind. And they freak out all day trying to find him, and the next day they hear Josh screaming in agony. And Heather finds his belongings and a cloth wrapped up in stick figures, and it's his teeth and blood, and she totally in shock and just disbelief, and she doesn't even tell Mike what's going on. And later on, we get the infamous apology scene, and after that, they find this abandoned house in the woods, and they follow Josh's voice, and they go into the abandoned home, and her and Mike are split up. They're trying to find Josh. Josh is screaming. Everyone is screaming at this point. And she finds Mike. And he's standing in the corner. And next thing you know, the cameras drop. And what a great way to end this movie. Because we never know what happened to Josh. We don't know what happened to Mike. But what happened to Heather? All we see is the camera on the ground and we hear a big thud. So we never know what's happening, and it's up to our imaginations until this day to find out what happened. And even in the Blair Witch 2016, you have Heather's brother looking for her, and it could have been her that's in that YouTube video. And I'll do a later review on the Blair Witch 2016 at a later time, so definitely be on the lookout for that. So that was my quick review. Like I said, this movie was genius and it's not for everyone, but if you remember the hype and controversy during this time, it stuck with you. And I just want to take a brief moment and share my memories of the promotion this movie did and, just what I remember about this movie. In 1999, I was 7 years old, and I clearly in my mind remember this movie being promoted. I thought it was real because Inside Edition did a piece on it, and, it was talking about the missing college students and everything, and it always stuck to my mind. I always wanted to know what happened. Was it real? Was it fake? And like 3 weeks later, the movie came out, and I remember everyone on the news stations talking about how much cussing was in this movie. And, they did so many F words and all of that. So I do remember that about the movie. Also, I remember hearing about people throwing up and getting motion sickness from the camera moving so much. I never had that problem. I don't know where that comes from, but I don't understand how people could. I guess I could see how people could get motion sickness, but it's worse movies than that come out today that people don't be throwing up in, like all these action films and stuff like that. And I don't know, people thought it was the most scariest film of all time because people were throwing up, but in reality, it was just a motion sickness. Now I want to talk about the acting. Heather Donahue did a great job, probably the best out of the three, and she doesn't get the respect she deserves for carrying this whole film. And she doesn't get the respect in the horror genre as a whole. I mean, in my opinion, she's a top 3 scream queen. That's just my opinion, and she deserves a spotlight. And she's the reason this movie took off, in my opinion, after people knew it was fake. And I thought Josh did a great job. Same with Mike. Everyone seemed to have great chemistry together. They actually made us believe everything. And it wasn't too over the top, and it wasn't underwhelming. And the strategy of them improvising their scenes was genius, because they were literally left in the woods by themselves. And the producers would leave notes and outlines of what to do and where to go. But a lot of those scenes were legit. They were being scared by the producers in the middle of the night while they were sleeping. So they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what to expect. And it's good because you're scared for real and you're reacting for real. And I honestly wish that more movies would use this strategy. And also, man, I wouldn't mind a Blair Witch Project prequel. I don't know how they can pull it off, but I'll be looking forward to that if that came to fruition, but I doubt it. But they do have additional footage that never made the official film. Hopefully in the near future we will get a special Blu-ray release of it, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So let's talk about the top 5 favorite scenes of this movie. Number 5 will be Mike singing America the Beautiful. It was so random but very intense. Just imagine being lost in the woods, mentally drained, hungry, wet, stressed. That's why I love these scenes, because it shows extreme emotion and it makes a better film. Number 4 will be the Burkittsville interviews. The Coffin Rock interview, to be specific. And these two fishermen are legendary. When somebody says the Blair Witch Project, this is the first scene to pop up in my mind. These two fishermen arguing about the Blair Witch. It's a small town feeling, and it makes the story more believable about the forgotten past of the city of Blair. Number 3 will be Heather screaming, "Josh!" to the top of her lungs. It's aggravating, but I love that scene. Number 2 is the suspenseful ending. That ending left everyone scared, confused, afraid, and wanting more. And here we are today with 2 sequels, and we still want more Blair Witch movies. My number 1 scene of the Blair Witch Project is the famous apology. What more can I say? It was great acting. She was crying, and a lot of horror fans know about this scene, and it's probably in my top 10 scenes of all horror movies. So I'm giving it high praise, and everyone should, because it's very, very intense, creative, and suspenseful. And moving on to talk about some theories people have talked about with the Blair Witch. Some have said that Ellie Kedward was just a victim, and the real evil entities was the woods itself, which is quite possible, especially in the 2016 Blair Witch movie. We get to see the actual woods conflicting harm on people and creating time loops. Ultimately, the Blair Witch Project was one of the best movies ever created, and it can never be duplicated. And it grossed over $248 million and created sequels, books, and video games. Yes, the Blair Witch Project created several video games back in the day. Gosh, I miss the 90s. Overall, I would give this movie a 5 out of 5. It's probably my second favorite horror film of all time. And my first favorite horror film of all time is, of course, Halloween 1978, which says a lot. I know a lot of people have their own opinions, so let's start the discussion down below. Tell me your memories about the Blair Witch Project. What do you think about this movie? And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and have a blessed day. Peace.